Okay, so today we're diving into one of the most fundamental crises of our time. And look, this isn't about left versus right or one policy versus another. It's about the clock speed of civilization itself. You see, our entire societal operating system, our laws, our institutions, our democracies, it was all designed for a totally different era, and it is literally breaking under the strain of the 21st century.
The heart of the problem is something called the velocity gap, and it's exactly what it sounds like, this ever-widening chasm between the speed of technology and the speed of our ability to govern it. We are at a huge historical turning point, kind of like the one that led to the birth of modern democracy. But this time, the challenge isn't a king, it's the sheer mind-bending, exponential pace of progress itself.
I mean, just look at the difference here. On one side, you've got governance. It moves at the speed of paper, it's built for a stable world, and it's slow and reactive. On the other side, you've got technology. We're talking AI, synthetic biology, quantum computing. This stuff moves at the speed of light, it creates constant disruption, and its growth isn't just fast, it's exponential. Trying to regulate one with the other, that's like trying to catch a bullet with a fishing net. It's just not going to work.
So if the problem is that big, who could possibly even begin to design a solution? Well, this brings us to the architect behind two really radical new blueprints for governance, Haraldur Gunnarsson. And his story, well, it's as unique as his ideas.
See, Haraldur doesn't come from some Ivy League school or a political dynasty. He actually grew up navigating the institutional systems in Denmark and Iceland. His perspective was forged not in a classroom, but in the very cracks of the systems he now wants to redesign. As he says himself, he knows exactly where they fail because he's lived it.
And what makes his approach so different is his neurodivergent profile. With ADHD and autistic traits, he has what he calls hypersystemic pattern recognition. It's like a different cognitive lens that lets him see the deep, structural root problems that most of us just completely miss. In this context, it's not a disability at all. It's a design superpower.
So what does this unique mind come up with? Well, the first blueprint is all about creating stability. It's called the Iridian Protocol. And the best way to think about it is as a fortress, one designed to protect timeless human values while battling all these crazy modern threats.
So the central idea here, and this is absolutely crucial, is something called temporal decoupling. The fatal flaw in our system right now is that everything moves at the same, painfully slow speed. The fortress model says, no way. Different parts of government have to operate on completely different timelines. And it has 5 layers. So at the very bottom, you've got the axiomatic foundation. These are eternal human rights, locked in with post-quantum cryptography, basically making them unchangeable. Then, in the middle, you have institutions with mandatory 20-year expiration dates. Yeah, 20 years, to prevent them from getting stale and corrupt. And then, right at the top, a real-time regulatory API that can govern things like AI and finance in milliseconds. And it's all overseen by a human oracle layer to make sure our core values are being translated correctly into code. So it's anchored in humanity, but just ruthless in its adaptability.
But what if a rigid fortress isn't the only answer? What if there's another way? The second blueprint starts from a completely different place. Instead of a stable structure designed to protect us, what if governance could be more like a living ecosystem that evolves?
And this brings us to the forest, the Fluent Sovereignty Protocol. And this one is a far more radical, more organic, bottom-up approach to solving the exact same problem.
The key idea here is biomimicry. It's asking us to stop thinking of a constitution as this static document, a set of rules carved in stone. Instead, it wants us to imagine it as a living organism, a system that can feel and react and adapt continuously, just like a forest or any other natural ecosystem.
And the pillars of this model are, well, they're pretty revolutionary. Just imagine being able to delegate your voting power to an expert on a specific topic, and then just withdraw it instantly if they betray your trust. Or imagine a river having its own smart wallet, automatically finding polluters in real time. Or a digital twin of our entire society that simulates new policies and just vetoes them if they lead to collapse. And finally, a headless state, so decentralized it has no single point of failure. Wild, right?
Okay, so these are two incredibly powerful but also very different visions of the future. But Haraldur is the first person to say that brilliant theories cooked up in isolation are not enough. They could have fatal flaws. And this, right here, leads to the most critical part of this entire proposal.
The scale of this challenge is just enormous. Back in the 20th century, a Manhattan Project was put together to split the atom, and it was driven by war. The argument here is that we desperately need that same level of urgency and focus today, not for war, but for the evolution and, frankly, the survival of democracy itself.
We have these incredible blueprints, right? But how do we find out where they break? How do we discover all the hidden dangers before we try to build a new world on top of them?
The answer is to build a lab, a synthetic governance lab, a place to bring together philosophers, physicists, tech experts, systems thinkers, and get them to do one thing: try to break these models. They would run them through all kinds of digital simulations, identify every single fatal flaw, and then collaboratively design stronger alternatives. It's about moving from one person's brilliant theory to a collectively stress-tested reality.
And that really leaves us with the final crucial question. We all know our current system, our 19th century operating system, is failing to keep up with the modern world. The evidence is all around us. And now, the blueprints for what could come next are on the table. So the real question for all of us is this: what are we prepared to build in its place?